Let's look at security in software development lifecycle. As we've mentioned before, SDLC is a structured process that focuses on producing high-quality software fast and cheap, to put it bluntly. So, referring to the triangle, it's about optimizing that triangle and not simply ignoring quality. More often than not, we first build the system and then we focus on finding bugs and fixing them. Now, why is this problematic? It's very inefficient and there is no real assurance, there is no real security assurance in place. To give you some clear examples of what happens when you do that, well, bug fixes might introduce new security vulnerabilities. So just fixing the bug, it could leave you open to new problems. There is always also the question, okay, there is a security bug, but did we find all the bugs? Did bug fixes fix all the occurrences of the same bug? And what about future occurrences of the same issue by, for instance, a new engineer that has joined recently the team? Now, typically you will have some phase gates in the traditional SDLC. For instance, an architectural review, although this is less widespread. Pen testing is the next time you want to think about security, at which point typically the experience is we've waited 3 weeks before go live to start a pen test. The report arrived on Friday before go live and reported 6 vulnerabilities. The project lead still insists on going live on Tuesday, the next week. And then the whole fight begins and the security gets blamed. Finally, one more of these gates is typically happening in the maintenance and it's all about patching. Often we also see things like incident detection and incident response teams, but that's kind of too little too late. And that is exactly what we're trying to get away from with this idea of secure by design, where security is not a point activity in the development lifecycle, but it is practiced throughout the entire development lifecycle. In this setting, we don't get caught by surprise with 6 critical vulnerabilities just before the launch. Now, one of the great things about the SAM model is not that it advocates not doing a pen test. However, having done all of this upfront work and having captured information about what your security concerns are, what your security features are supposed to be doing, you can have a more valuable pen test. By having practiced secure by design principles and by having actively thought about what your security features should look like, you can hand the pen testers a much better scoping document. So that would also lead to having a lot more confidence that they are not going to catch a bunch of silly things that should have never gotten to production. That would also help you assess whether you should still go live on Tuesday or not, depending on the risk that you can easily determine based on this work that you have done upfront. Now, leveraging a secure by design framework like SAM would allow you to minimize the overall time and reduce costly fixes later in the lifecycle. So SAM is a strategic approach to assure software quality, increase systematicity, and focus on security functionality and security hygiene. That's what SAM is all about. Now, while the presentation material lays out this linear and waterfall style SDLC, one of the things to keep in mind is that in an agile environment, you are really just doing this repeatedly. So new features are coming in the backlog and they go through this whole process. So folks who operate in a strict agile environment like Scrum or Kanban, they really do waterfall more often than they realize. So this slide is an attempt to represent the same idea in an agile setting. You have planning and preparation for security that goes on before even features come into the sprint. That is really worth the investment. So if you have those security policies, security guidelines, coding standards, having gone through the threat modeling and having all of those in the backlog as dependencies, well, secure in an agile setting involves a similar systematic approach of planning, preparing security throughout the entire process. Then, during the sprint planning, the team might say, okay, we would like to work on this new feature, right? It's a 5-point feature. And it has 3 other security features that are also required. And okay, that is the sprint. Let's get those things done. Understanding that the shiny feature carries with it some additional work and having all that spelled out planning is more realistic and the team is not caught by surprise. And that basically makes everyone happier. You know, the quality of the analysis drives everyone's happiness during the sprint work. And it's no less true when we're talking about adding security analysis to that. Finally, in a DevSecOps, or whatever you prefer to call it, the idea of security by design is that security should be baked in throughout each phase of the development lifecycle. Now, the cornerstones of a secure SDLC or SDLC and the broader application security program are, first of all, getting the right people in the right roles and making sure they understand their responsibilities and supporting them to accomplish those responsibilities. So, first of all, people. Then, processes, giving these people low friction processes. That is the next most important thing. We want people to care about security, but we know that if we require them to do things that are burdensome to do, they will always find ways not to do them. So we want to have checks, a few gates that we have in place. Those should be really substantive. The knowledge base, making sure people understand where their compliance requirements are, what the coding standards are, driven by a quality concern. You want to make sure that all the policies you have in place clearly rationalize why and why do people have to do these things. Obviously, tools can help automate and speed up things. The tooling could support the developers, but it could also be security-specific tooling, assessment, management tooling, and so on. Now, what we're really talking about here, everything about security is a risk management function. The things that we're asking people to do are meant to drive down the risk. Security features are meant to address risks. Finally, we want to make sure that all of that is well understood. So the investment in the required training needs to be there. There are several SDLC initiatives and AppSec programs out there. Here is a list of the most known initiatives. Now, a comparison and a dive deep into each of these approaches is outside the scope of this course. I would say though that SAM and BSIM, both of which originate from the Open SAM, are the most common approaches to application security. Now, all of these SDLCs and AppSec programs have a few elements in common. The security of deployed software is everyone's concern. Separate security teams have to be working closely with the development teams. Ideally, security people and security teams should literally infect development teams rather than having them split in silos. So everyone is thinking about security. The second commonality is that there is a clear understanding of what is important to the organization. Risk. This is often lacking in reality. Policies and practices are put in place because someone said, oh, we should be doing this. But then when the question is asked, well, what's the executive's risk appetite? What are the core security concerns coming from the executives and the board? Very often the answer is, well, we don't know. We haven't really talked about it to them. And then the question is, if you don't know, how do you know you're doing the right things? In all these frameworks, all these initiatives, there will be elements around understanding what the priorities are and where the risk lies, and basically what people are worrying about. And a bunch of things, important things like security requirements, implementation standards, security testing, visible metrics, all of these frameworks, if you dig into them, will have all of these practices as core elements. Final word on SDLCs. This course is about SAM, and SAM is a software assurance maturity model, and it is actually broader than an SDLC. It deals with more organization-wide aspects that are typically located in governance and operations. Hence, the following topics are also part of what is covered in SAM. For instance, overall security strategy, metrics, policy compliance, data protection, decommissioning systems, hardening configurations, incident management, and so on. And not every SDLC initiative that I've shown in one of the previous slides is an assurance program. Actually, only SAM and PSIM are.